to the launch of the report, How Transparent is Municipal Procurement. It is 10 o'clock. We are ready to start. See, some people are still joining us, but I think we can get the proceedings moving so long, and I'm sure people will join us and slot into the program as they join us. My name is Jaap de Visser. I work for the Dalla Omar Institute at the University of the Western Cape, and it's my pleasure to moderate this webinar this morning. Thank you very much for joining us. I'm sure there's a certain amount of webinar fatigue already setting in. It's the end of the year. We have been attending webinars since last year. It's become the preferred mode of interaction, and yet it is not actually what we would like. We would much prefer to be in a room with you and engage with you personally, but it is what it is. So we're very excited to be able to host these proceedings this morning, and thank you very much again for joining. We are doing this together with the International Budget Partnership that is also in attendance here, and we're very fortunate to do this project together with them. IBP is headed by Albert van Zyl, who will join us this morning, and Colleen van der Westhuizen is also here with us and will speak on the project as well. So the topic for the report launch and the theme for this project has to do with the transparency in local government with respect to municipal procurement. The background to this project and the question that we've been asking in this project, which is in its second iteration. We also launched a similar report last year and expanded on it for this year. The question that we're asking is, how transparent are municipalities when they are procuring goods and services in the running of their affairs? Of course, municipalities procure goods and services all the time. Many of these goods and services are critical for service delivery, and quite often procurement is seen as something between the municipality and those who are trying to get the work, who are tendering, and the communities that are affected by these contracts and by what the municipality has procured, particularly when the contract deals with service delivery issues, are not really taken into account much when it comes to procurement. It's seen as something between the municipality and those who tender for service for contracts. We are asking the question, can communities affected by these contracts find out what services have been procured, what services are supposed to be delivered, and how much can they find out about how actually those procurement activities were conducted, and what the actual contracts were that were put in place. Because we are of the view, DOI and the International Budget Partnership, that residents of municipalities should be able to find out on the municipality's website what procurement has been engaged into and how that affects them. So that's the background to this project, and the research team has examined 49 municipal websites to interrogate those websites on the basis of a number of questions to see how transparent those websites are when it comes to procurement. So that's the background, and we're thrilled that you're joining us, and let's get into the meat of things. But before we do that, we want to welcome Ms. Francisca Spuri, I hope I'm pronouncing it correctly, who will sort of grace us with an opening set of remarks. She is the head of economic cooperation and development at the Embassy of Switzerland to South Africa, Botswana, Eswatini, Lesotho, Mauritius, and Namibia. That is quite a large portfolio of countries that are all served by that unit. So we're thrilled to have her with us. She represents the State Secretariat for Economic Affairs, very active in South Africa, supporting initiatives and programs, particularly around public finance management and procurement. That's one of the key aspects of the portfolio. So what we're doing here, I think, is fall smack bang in the middle of that portfolio. So we're very grateful and chuffed to have Ms. Puri here with us to tell us a bit about the work that her unit does, and yeah, hopefully give some insights into what her thoughts and the thoughts of her unit are on the work that we're doing, and yeah, the relevance of it. So fantastic to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us. I see your camera is on, so over to you, Ms. Spudi.
Thank you very much. Yeah, but it's Francisca. I think that's easier. I just got hit by load shedding, so this is why I was off for 2 minutes until the generator kicked in again. But yeah, we all know the struggles in South Africa with virtual meetings and load shedding. It is a great pleasure for me to speak today. But of course, it will be much more interesting what the next presenters and respondents have to say, because this is what really then happens on the ground. But maybe some general words of introduction. First of all, I mean, we as the Swiss State Secretariat of Economic Affairs, we only focus on South Africa and the overall Swiss embassy with their diplomatic work and also economic and private sector. They work in all the countries you mentioned. But from a SECO point of view, effective and efficient public financial management is one of the key areas we work, as you said. And they are, in my view, the backbone of any good government. If you don't have it in place, then many other things will not work. It is almost like the salt for cooking. If it is missing, then you can't kind of compensate for it. And we strongly believe sometimes it's one of the topics that gets forgotten. It is not, as my team knows, I always say it's not the sexy topic, right? It sounds like dry and technical and boring, but in the end, as I say, for me, I sometimes make the analogy to a bass player in a rock band. It is the one nobody sees, but if he messes up, if he doesn't keep the rhythm, then the whole song is out of rhythm. And I think with public financial management, it is similar. Therefore, SECO focuses on many different endeavors to strengthen public financial management in the country. We work at national level to improve the framework conditions, regulations, but of course also at subnational level to support the government in this endeavor. And why at subnational level? And I think here we see also the link to the municipal procurement work that the Institute and the IBP has done. It is where service delivery is happening. And in the end, public financial management often sounds like something very abstract, but in the end, it is what the citizens get from the government. It's one of the core functions government has to fulfill, and it's the channel, the system that allows for good public service and infrastructure delivery. I'm also very pleased that, and I think it's one of our key tasks as development partners to also bring different actors together. And in this specific case, I'm very glad that with our collaboration with IBP and the Asivikelane initiative that looks at the engagement of citizens in this whole kind of municipal finance and procurement and service delivery, that we managed that, I call it our pink municipalities were included in this analysis. For those in the audience who don't know pink, it is National Treasury's public procurement, infrastructure and knowledge management program, where financed by SECO, that supports provinces and municipalities in improving their public procurement, infrastructure management and knowledge management. So also I think that is a key task of us to bring these stakeholders together. With regard again, the importance of service delivery, of course, procurement is one of the key ingredients in this. We call it the circle of public finances. And if public procurement is not working, then you have a missing gap. And of course, again, as I said, service delivery is the key, one of the key tasks of government. And to have these good public services and infrastructure delivery, I strongly believe that we need the engagement, a continuous dialogue between government and citizens. But of course, to have this dialogue in place, we need transparent public finances, and in particular, transparent and simple public procurement that allows also the citizen to understand what kind of services they should receive and how it works, and also then to go back to the government and make clear that something might have not happened. So transparent, simple public procurement systems are in a way a precondition for efficient, effective service delivery. Let me illustrate this point with a little anecdote. And that was, we had South African officials as visitors in Switzerland. And then we visited the city of Zurich and the responsible for road management, maintenance, and also, of course, procurement. And then he explained to the South African officials how this works in Switzerland. He said, yeah, well, then I receive the offers, I evaluate the offers, there is a winning party, I present my analysis to my boss, he approves, and it's done. And I mean, you could see the eyes of the South African officials. They were like totally astonished, couldn't believe what they hear. They said, but okay, I mean, I mean, it was just you. He said, yes. Were there other kind of bid committees? He said, no. I say, but how does that work? I mean, how can you make sure that there is no corruption in such a system? He said, well, it's because of the transparency, because they have a platform at the city of Zurich where all the results are published. So all the bidders go there and see who wins. So basically, the processes are very simple, very transparent, and through the transparency, the officials are also forced to do a proper job, because otherwise you are under a lot of pressure from the private sector, but also, of course, from government. And it's very easy to find the responsible of decision making, in this case, the public procurement. And I think this is key to keep in mind when we talk about that. And looking at South Africa, both, of course, the transparency will help to increase also the accountability of government, but also to really help citizens to engage. And I truly believe to make a difference in South Africa on the ground, this dialogue between the public and the private is a key ingredient for success to move ahead with sustainable development and making a change in citizens' life. I think with that, I want to conclude and then hand over to the presentation that I'm sure will shed some light in the challenges of the municipalities. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Franziska, and thanks for such a wonderful input and really encouraging us to do this work. And you know, if I really enjoyed listening to your anecdote, because for me, that is one of the key issues behind what we're doing here. Because and also to sort of give away a little bit my own angle and my own bias in this is I'm very, very impressed with the enormous edifice that we have built in terms of reporting and checks and balances in procurement. It's massive. There are multiple national treasury circulars. There is a Municipal Finance Management Act. There is supply chain management regulations. There are supply chain management policies in each municipality. There are circulars. There's no shortage of laws and regulations that deal with how procurement ought to be done. And there's a huge edifice of reporting and checks and balances, the vast majority of which takes place within government. A lot of governments checking each other on procurement, and that's fantastic, and that should happen. However, the issue of transparency, you're almost suggesting obviates a lot of that when you get it right, and you can actually end up with one official making a decision but the whole world is watching. At the moment, I think we have a different system, and I think these are the questions that we're asking in terms of how we view this project. So very interesting already, the angle that you bring in, the value of transparency and how it intersects with the internal government reporting and accountability that we seem to be focusing mostly on. Anyway, let me not get ahead of myself, because we must still actually listen to the authors of the report. So without further ado, which is another way of saying let's not waste time, let's hand over to the team. I'm going to hand over to Professor Tanash Chikwata and Ms. Thabile Tlhomtlo. Both of them are working at the Dalla Omar Institute. Tanash is the head of the multi-level government projects at the Dalla Omar Institute. And Ms. Thabile Tlhomtlo is a lecturer in constitutional law at the University of the Western Cape, the law faculty, but also a researcher at the Institute in the multi-level government project. And both of them have been very active in doing this research, which was led by Tanash. They'll do a joint presentation of the research. But before I hand over to them, I do also want to recognize and acknowledge the other authors of the project. And I'm going to ask them to briefly switch on their cameras, if they don't mind, so that we can just see who they are, because this has been a joint project of a whole group of researchers and people working in IBP and the Dalla Omar Institute. So I see Kirtley Stevens is there with us, Thabile Tlhomtlo, Tanash. I saw Jenica Bierkes also in the room. She's also one of the authors. Melissa Zizwa is one of the authors. Xavier Pozwa. I think I have just about mentioned everyone. I don't know whether Michelle Mazivisa is in the room. If you are, please switch on your microphone. There you are. I see Michelle. We also had Pumla Klati on the team, but I don't see her in the room. Tanash, have I mentioned everyone? Because this was a big team and you were leading it.
No
I think
way.
Claudine is also here with us, but you're coming through a bit.
I'm so sorry. I didn't know I was not on mute. My apologies.
All right, welcome. Great. So it was a big team. A lot of people worked on the report, so it's great to have them, most of them here, and to acknowledge their contribution and their hard work. But let me hand over to Tanash and Thabile to take us through the report. Tanash, over to you.
Thank you, Prof. Yap, for that. And I'm excited to co-present the results of our work. As Prof. Yap already mentioned, this is a team effort, so we are only representing the other members of the team that are also in the audience. May you just give me a moment to share my screen, and then off we go. Just a second.
While we're waiting, I see Henry Kichana is also in the room. He was also one of the co-authors. So just to also recognize Henry's contribution. Back to you, Tanash.
Okay. I believe you can see my screen. Please, may you confirm?
Yes, we can see it.
Okay, and just to move to improve the flow, I'm just going to stop my video so that the connection can be perfect. So okay, so our report is titled "How Transparent is Municipal Procurement?" and Prof. Yap and the AJ speaker have already given us a detailed background on why we did this research and why it is important, particularly at local government level, to look into this issue of transparency. And in that, we make a very strong case for transparent municipal procurement. And earlier speakers have already mentioned why it is important to have a transparent procurement in local government. And for me, I think two key issues are very important. We need transparency to enforce accountability. And the second one, transparency is important to enable citizens and community organizations and civil society at large to participate in matters of local government. So that's why I think it is important for us to have transparency, not just in procurement, but beyond other aspects of local government. And the backbone of a transparent local government, I think, stems from Section 217 of the Constitution. And this provision requires specifically municipalities and all other organs of state to procure goods and services in a transparent manner. And of course, the provision also requires that the issue of value for money must be achieved in procurement. But for today's discussion, and the key issue there is that procurement must be transparent. I think that's what stems out from Section 217 of the Constitution. And this is further developed by legislation, and this includes the Municipal Finance Management Act and several other regulatory regimes that are there to ensure that there is transparency in local government, and in particular in procurement. And one of the ways of promoting transparency in local government is the requirement, the legal requirement, that each municipality must establish and maintain a functional website. So the law requires all of our municipalities, all of the 257 municipalities, to establish a functional website and ensure that that website is updated frequently and it has got information on that website. So this is a legal requirement that we have, and municipalities, as I said, must use this website to publish information and for citizens to be able to go on these websites to get information about service delivery, including procurement information. So this is a case that we are making for transparent local government procurement, because we believe that it has got a strong link with service delivery. When local government is transparent, when procurement is transparent, we think that there are likely going to be positives in service delivery at the local level. How we conducted this research. In the earlier introduction, I think Prof. Yaptifis has already given a perspective of some of the things that we did, but in a brief, we looked at 49 municipalities, all the metros included, and a selected number of local and district municipalities across all the 9 provinces. So this is 15 more municipalities than we did in 2020. In 2020, we surveyed 34 municipalities. And the survey period for this year, we looked at procurement information that was published between 1 August of 2020 and 31 July 2021. So that was the survey period. And as with the 2020 survey, the methodology was largely shaped by absence of a public record of municipal procurement. In other words, we do not have a record of what each and every municipality has procured over the years or over the months. So our conclusions in this research is based on realistic assessment, judging the completeness of data and lack thereof that has been provided on municipal websites. And we did the assessment in the same period from 2 August to 15 September 2020. So in brief, this is how we conducted the research, and detailed issues around the methodology of the survey are well developed in the reports that will be shared in due course. And to establish how transparent municipalities are, we asked 8 questions. And these 8 questions, the first one deals with whether a municipality has a functional website. The second aspect of it is whether there is a dedicated page for procurement information which can be accessed without registration. And the issue of registration is very important, because we think as ordinary citizens, if there is a requirement for one to register, it may be an impediment for some of our citizens to be able to access the procurement page. The second key question, we looked at whether a municipality is publishing tender notices on its website. We also looked at whether a municipality is publishing tender specifications for those notices which can be accessed free of charge. We also looked at whether a municipality is publishing the names of companies or individuals who won tenders on its website. Then the fifth question, we also looked at whether the specifications remain accessible on the municipal website once the contract has been awarded. So that's another critical issue that we are trying to look at, and which is very important for citizen participation as well. Then we also looked at whether municipalities are publishing the prices of contracts. So once a contract has been awarded, is there somewhere where the prices is published to say this contractor got this contract at this price? We also looked at whether municipalities are publishing any kind of information that shows how projects that have been given to or awarded to private contractors are going to be implemented. So in my ward, if I'm interested in a particular delivery of a service, is there any information available on the municipal websites that I can rely upon to see how the project is going to be implemented? And lastly, we also looked and asked the question whether municipalities are publishing procurement information on both the municipal website and the National Treasury's e-tender portal. So these are the 8 key questions that we asked, and in order to answer the question of how transparent is municipal procurement. Now I'm going to hand over to my co-presenter, Kabile, to take us through the substance of what we actually found during the survey. Kabile, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Tinashe. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, you are. Please go ahead.
All right. So I will continue on from my colleague and keep my camera off just so we have a smooth presentation also from my side. So following from the list that we've just seen from Prof. Chigwata, the first question dealt with the functionality of websites. And the findings that we got from there is that out of the 49 municipalities that were in the survey, only 45 of those actually had functional websites. And by functional in this case, it meant a website that was accessible at the time of the survey. So it could be that today you can actually go on and find information, but during that August 2020 to July 21 period, we had difficulties accessing the website. Further on to that, we found some challenges around the issue of functionality. So some municipalities' websites might have been functional, but when you went into a tender tab or a procurement tab, we didn't find any procurement information. And an example of that would be like the Greater Taung municipality in Northwest, or Indaga local municipality in KZN that didn't have any information on its website. We also had municipalities that had outdated information. So for example, David Morulong, as well as David Kraper in the Northern Cape had tender pages, but the information wasn't relevant to our survey period. It was quite outdated. Some of the other challenges that we found were inaccessible pages where you click on a tab and the 404 page, or I'm not sure what that 404 stands for, but that would come up. So it basically barred us from getting information. And some of the municipalities' websites were not very user-friendly. For example, with City of Johannesburg, their procurement information was nestled under a tab that was titled Work in Joburg. So if you go onto the website as a community member, you wouldn't know that that's the place you need to find tender procurement information. Work in Joburg could mean anything from vacancies to just generally working there. The website was also not easy to navigate. So you needed to click a lot to eventually get to the documents. There were a lot of folders, and some of those documents were titled incorrectly. So that also factors in when it comes to functionality of websites. But we did also have best practices come out of Buffalo City, Knysna Municipality, Mossel Bay, and Sugalingwa, for example, where they had clear content. So their websites were user-friendly, they were easy to navigate. You required very little clicks to ultimately get to the tender documents. And the information was presented in a very neat and accessible way. So you don't need to be technologically savvy to be able to get to the information. The second question that we then dealt with looked at the publication of tender notices. So why is this important? What are these for? So tender notices serve as information on new tenders. So it alerts contractors who may want to submit bids. It also alerts the public that a tender is about to come out and money is about to be spent. So be on the lookout. These they're also important because they have information on the name of departments that are intending to procure goods. It has the description of the goods or services that are being procured and where the bid documents can be found. So our observations when we looked at this question is that from the 45 municipalities that had functional websites and dedicated procurement pages, only 26 municipalities actually published lists of tender notices that seemed complete. And we've underlined seemed complete because we were gauging from the 12-month period that we did the assessment and looking at the number of tenders that were advertised during that period. So where a municipality over 12 months advertised a lot, then it seemed complete. But if it advertised, for example, 4 to 5 tenders in a space of 12 months, then it leans towards being incomplete or seeming incomplete. And we had 15 of those 45 municipalities that had lists that seemed incomplete. And it ranged from Emfuleni local municipality to Mangaung Metro in the Free State. We also then had 4 municipalities out of the total of 45 that didn't publish any tender notices at all during the survey period. And those were Joe Morolong in the Northern Cape, Greater Taung in Northwest, Ehlanzeni in Mpumalanga, and Metsimaholo in Free State. We also noticed that the poor performance or good performance of municipalities actually, it cuts across the subcategories. So it's not that one specific category of municipalities will fail to publish tenders because, for example, they're district municipalities or they're local municipalities in rural settings. It actually cut across because we had metro municipalities that performed poorly. We had secondary cities that also performed poorly. And my colleague just showed down there that of the total municipalities that did publish, the most came from metros, secondary cities, and your local municipalities that had a communal setting. So it cuts across. It's not necessarily that metros will publish tenders, so that expectation versus reality doesn't come out. Right, so the next question that we then dealt with was whether a municipality publishes tender specifications that are downloadable free of charge on their websites. And the importance of tender specifications is that, well, they should accompany a tender notice because they contain details, very important details on the nature of the requested goods, the technical specifications of what exactly is being procured, the scope of services, the goods or the volume of goods, and the time of delivery that these goods or services are going to be rendered. It also, specifications also inform the community on what they should expect of the service delivery. So they use that tool to compare what is in the documents versus what they get in reality, or in some instances don't even get. So it's an accountability tool against poor performance. And our observations from this question was that of the 45 municipalities, only 9 of those made their tender specifications freely available online. So you could get it online without registering and without a hassle. But then another 9 of the municipalities out of the 45 published some of these tender specifications online. So for example, if a municipality would state that if the tender specifications are not available on the website, then they would be available at the municipal offices for a reasonable fee, a non-refundable reasonable fee. And those range from David Kruiper in the Northern Cape to Knysna in Mossel Bay in the Western Cape, and Sol Plaatje in the Northern Cape. And then the majority of the municipalities from our pool that was surveyed actually didn't publish any tender specifications online. And that was 27 of those municipalities. Most of these municipalities' specifications would be available at their office for a fee, a reasonable non-refundable fee. So we found that there are clearly barriers to transparency when it comes to getting tender specifications. And they lied with the failure of municipalities to publish. So this inhibits the public from knowing the details of the requested goods. There were also costs that are attached. So getting tender specifications becomes a costly exercise and a barrier for community members to get those documents. And it also seems like where costs are attached, it's targeted towards companies that will have the money to pay in order to receive the documents if they have an intention to bid. And those fees range from 100 rands to, for example, Ngaka Mudire in Northwest that required 3,049 rands for one to access tender documents. So for an ordinary citizen, you wouldn't have that money or wouldn't be willing to pay that money to access tender documents. There were also issues, I'm not done, Tinashe. Sorry, there were also issues of expiring documents. So Metsimahulu, for example, had expiry dates for their specifications. So if you don't download it now, in a month to come, you may not have access to it. There were also those issues of signing in that we'd already alluded to in the first question, where eThekwini required you to sign in to get specifications. And in other instances, a lot of the notices say that tender specifications will be available on the website, but those promises are not met. In reality, you don't find the tender specifications on the website. Now we can move. The next question was around the publication of the names of successful bidders. So once an individual or company has won, do municipalities publish these names? And it's a legal requirement that this be done within 5 working days after an award is made. And this is done so as to enable the community to know who's supposed to deliver promised goods or services in their area and who to hold accountable together with the municipality. So our observations from this is that only 6 of the 45 municipalities consistently and regularly published the names of successful bidders. And out of that 6, we only had 2 metros, being City of Cape Town and Nelson Mandela Bay, that did this consistently and regularly. But also, it's only David Kraper from the Northern Cape that did it within 5 working days, or it was the only municipality that we could verify that actually did it within 5 working days. The rest of the municipalities didn't do it within 5 working days, but on a weekly basis or 2 weekly basis. So it was consistent to a certain degree. We then had 20 municipalities out of the 45 that published the names, but not within the 5 working days, or the list seemed incomplete. And these were cases where, for example, Mangaung and City of Ekurhuleni would publish on a monthly basis, or some municipalities did so on a quarterly basis or on an annual basis. So it wasn't consistent, but there was information. And then 19 of the remaining municipalities didn't publish the names at all. So, example for Thulamela local municipality in Limpopo has a section that's titled awarded tenders, but when you click on that section, you don't have any information on awarded tenders. So it causes a barrier to access that type of information. And it seems that the situation hasn't gotten any better when compared to our 2020 results. In fact, more municipalities are now not publishing the names of awarded tenders or companies and individuals versus last year where we had lesser municipalities. Okay, I hope I'm making sense. So these are one of the questions where from our observations, we also noticed that COVID-19 could have possibly had an impact on a municipality's operations, because in some cases, such as City of Johannesburg, they were publishing consistently in the years of 2012 until 2019. But then suddenly in 2020, 2021, they're no longer publishing the names of successful bidders. Same thing was observed in Emfuleni, that last published in May 2020, and Mopane that last published in May 2019. So it seemed like they had a culture of publishing, but possibly the impact of the pandemic prevented them from doing so going forward. And then in other municipalities, we couldn't find any link to the COVID-19 pandemic. Municipalities such as Joe Morolong in Northern Cape and Machabeng in Free State had stopped publishing the names of successful bidders way back in 2016 and 2017. So an argument can be made to say the operations were halted because of the pandemic. Thank you, Tinashe. Yes. And then on our 5th question, we looked at the accessibility of tender specifications after an award has been made. So where municipalities do publish tender specifications, do they keep them on the website for the duration of the awarded contract? And this is important because tender specifications can be used in place of actual contracts for community members to compare what was promised or what was tendered for in the tender specifications versus the actual performance by a contractor. So again, it's a monitoring tool. It helps with accountability. And what we found in our assessment was that 5 out of the 45 municipalities kept their specifications after an award was made and during the course of the contract. And those 5 are listed in your screen. Sadly, disappointingly, no metro was spotted there. And then 11 of the 45 kept the specifications on their website, but it wasn't for the entire duration of the contract. And these municipalities ranged from your local municipalities, such as Dishabeng and Tswelopele in Free State, to Mopani district in Limpopo, and 2 metros from Gauteng, being City of Johannesburg and Tshwane, who kept the specifications, but not for the entire duration. And then a chunk of our municipalities, being 29 out of 45, either didn't publish tender specifications at all, or when they did, they removed them once a contract was awarded. And 6 of our metros out of the total of 8 did this. So it was worrying that, there was a barrier for members to access these specifications and use them in place of contracts to be able to hold, for example, metros to account. And it limits informed engagement between community members, the municipality, and contractors when it comes to the services that are delivered, or in other cases, not delivered. We then had our next question, which dealt with the publication of contract prices. So why is it important for a municipality to publish a contract price? And that's because, money is being spent. As taxpayers, you want to know where your money is going. And you need to be able to assess the value for money. So is the stadium that we've been built, or the stadium that we've received, attached with the money that was paid to it? Does it make sense? Is the value for money what we received? And here our results were that 9 out of the 45 municipalities surveyed published the prices consistently. And we had 2 metros, Mangaung and Buffalo City, that do so. 6 local municipalities, ranging from Makana in Eastern Cape to Rustenburg in the Northwest, and Polokwane in Limpopo, and only 1 district municipality, which is Ugu from KZN. This question is also one of the questions where we questioned or raised the issue of COVID-19 and whether there was an impact that prevented municipalities from fulfilling this obligation. And again, in some cases, yes, we could draw the link that there were municipalities that published contract prices consistently before COVID-19. But in other cases, municipalities had long stopped publishing. So there we deduced that there was a culture of non-transparency. Municipalities just didn't make the information available or didn't feel the need to do so. Another issue that popped out for us in that question was the metro's performance, a really bad performance from metros, where it seemed like they lack transparency when it comes to contract prices, which is quite worrying as they are our economic hubs. So a lot of procurement is undertaken by metros, a lot of money is spent. You would expect or want them to be most transparent about the money that is being used. We also found that there were barriers to the transparency of contract prices or publishing contract prices, where some municipalities publish intentions to award, and tied to them objection periods where members of the community were assumed could object to the award or the price. But those weren't followed with the final price or publishing of the final price of the contract. There were also instances such as in Stellenbosch in the Western Cape, where the contract prices were removed from the website within a short space of time. So those expiry dates attached to tendering documents. We also had some best practices, though, where Rustenburg, for example, in the Northwest, had very detailed procurement information. In their award list, They tell you the price, the tenders that are received, what the price range of the different bids were, what the actual price of the tender is, and what the duration of the contract is. So it's quite detailed and it's helpful if you want to track the spending. We also had, for example, in Polokwane, where they published their contract prices on a monthly basis, as well as on financial year basis. So if you don't find a particular document under the monthly publications, you can go and search for it under the different financial years. So different avenues for you to get to the information. And that was quite commendable. And then on our 7th question, we dealt with the publication of implementation plans or service delivery agreements and asked whether municipalities do publish these documentations. And an SDA or implementation plans, it serves as a tool. It basically, it shows you how the contract will be implemented. So community members, again, know exactly who's responsible for delivering a service, how often they'll be delivering it, and in what form they'll be getting that service or the goods. So again, this is a monitoring tool, same as tender specifications. What we found when we looked at this question is that only one municipality out of the 45 published service level agreements, and that is Knysna local municipality in the Western Cape. But also, it didn't do so consistently, as we only found one service level agreement that was downloadable. So it was disappointing to a certain extent because only one of the SLAs were available. And the remaining 44 municipalities didn't publish specific implementation plans. So they had your generic standardized type of contracts that didn't really speak to a particular project and the technical specifications of it. And we found that compared to our previous survey of 2020, there was no improvement. We went from 2020 where no municipalities published implementation plans to only one municipality doing so in 2021. So that was also disappointing. And the failure to do so results in municipalities and contractors being less accountable because community members don't have that information to call municipalities and contractors out and have them account for non-performance. So at least, either make tender specifications available or make SDAs available. So there's a form of tracking that can take place. And yes, I think my time is done. Tinashe?
Thank you, Tabile, for that. I'll deal with question 8 and give some conclusive remarks as well as some of the key steps that we have identified for the improvement of transparency. So let me deal with question 8. Question 8 dealt with the issue of publication of procurement information on the e-tender portal. And this stems from, I think, from National Treasury Circular that requires municipalities to publish procurement information on the e-tender portal platform. And this information includes awarded bids and any deviations on the website. Our 2020 survey pointed to a number of challenges associated with the portal. And we recommended that a revamp of the portal was necessary to enhance transparency and accessibility of information. And earlier in the year, the National Treasury took some steps to improve the functionality of the website of the e-tender portal. In that run period, that earlier part of the year, we realized that the portal was experiencing a number of challenges. some of whom were actually, I think it was published in some of the media houses. And because of the challenges that the platform was experiencing, the National Treasury gave municipalities a moratorium from publishing procurement information on the portal until such a time when the portal was functional. So this is the background to the e-tender portal and some of the work that the National Treasury has been putting in to revamp the website, the portal, which has not come with which has come with some challenges for municipalities, particularly to publish procurement information. So currently, and when we did the research, the e-tender portal is now revamped, and it was functional when we did the research, which is about 2 months ago. So we thought still it was, I think, necessary to look into how effective is the new portal, how easy is it to access procurement information on the portal, and importantly, to ask the question of whether municipalities are making use of the portal to publish procurement information. What you see on the screen here is a table. In the table, we try to compare what we found out in the 2020 survey and what we found out in the 2020 survey with regards to municipalities publishing procurement information on the e-tender portal. You can see that in 2020, we established that there were 5 municipalities that were publishing the same procurement information on their website on the e-tender portal. The 2021 survey has revealed that none of the municipalities that we looked at actually published the same procurement information on their website as well as on the e-tender portal. We also established that the number of municipalities that are only making use of their website or the e-tender portal has increased. In the 2020 survey, there were only 7 municipalities, but in the 2021 survey, we established that there are now 29 municipalities that are only making use of the e-tender portal or the municipal website to publish procurement information, which is about 59% of the sample. But our research, importantly, actually revealed that none of these 29 municipalities are actually making use of the e-tender portal to publish procurement information. So previously, there were 7 that were doing that, but now the 29, they are only publishing procurement information on their own website. And then there are those municipalities that are not publishing procurement information in any of the sites. So I think we can clearly see that there is a significant departure from municipalities relying on the e-tender portal to publish procurement information to most of them actually publishing procurement information on their own website. And this can be understood against the background of some of the challenges that the platform, the e-tender platform, has been experiencing, particularly in the earlier part of the year. One of our key findings, we established that the worst performing municipalities, that those ones that do not have functional website, or those municipalities that do not publish up-to-date, that do not have up-to-date procurement information on the website. We established that these municipalities, they are actually not making use of the e-tender portal to publish procurement information. So their website might be dysfunctional. They might not have up-to-date information on their own website, but they are not making use of the e-tender portal, and which is worrying because the e-tender portal is freely available for use by the public sector. So the critical question is if there are issues around the functionality of their own website, why are they not making of a free portal, the e-tender portal that is available for them to use? We also noted that of some of these municipalities that do not have functional website or that do not publish procurement information, they are either category B3s or B4 municipalities, and these municipalities tend to be small or presiding over rural towns. And this could point to capacity issues that these municipalities may be experiencing which is preventing them from publishing procurement information or maintaining functional websites. And we also had to look and answer the question of whether the new tender portal is user-friendly. So we understand that the portal has been undergoing changes, it is being revamped, but we thought, I think it was still necessary to look and answer this question, whether the new portal is user-friendly. And we established that the portal is improved in many areas. I think the National Treasury must be applauded for having put the work to make the e-tender portal more useful, and we see that it is increased. The search function on the e-tender portal has been widened. It is now easier to find procurement information on the e-tender portal. So those are some of the positives that we found with the new portal, that I think the search function is quite comprehensive, and it's easier to actually find information for municipalities. You can actually just type the name of the municipality and all the information that you're looking for will pop up. But we also observed around that time when we did the research that the portal has some challenges. And one of the challenges that we saw was that the information seems to be jumbled up. For example, when we searched for procurement information for Komazi local municipality, we established that the information for Bush Park Ridge local municipality appeared. So there seems to be a mix of information, the jumbling of procurement information for different municipalities, which could be attributed to, I think, the changes that the platform is going, and the issue might have been resolved by now. But those are some of the issues that we have observed regarding the revamped e-tender portal. So those are some of the findings that we had on the 8 questions. And now, by way of conclusive remarks, I think it is clear from our survey and from our research that the state of transparency with respect to municipal procurement has not improved. I think that's what is coming out from the survey. And in some respect, as my colleague Tabile has already, I think, explained, the level of transparency has actually worsened. And we also observed that tender notices, if you look across all the municipalities that had functional websites, the 45 of them, I think the common practice is to publish tender notices. So tender notices are the most commonly published form of procurement information. But there is a lack of transparency when it comes to the publication of other procurement information. So we're talking of your specifications, the name of successful bidders, tender prices, implementation plans. So all this kind of information, I think it's very rare to find in municipalities on municipal website, and which is concerning. And it is also clear as well that the lack of transparency transcends municipal categories and subcategories. So you're not only talking about your smaller or poorer municipalities failing to be transparent. You also have your high category municipalities, your cities, your metros, also not performing well on a number of questions. And we also established that there are capacity limitations that might be making it difficult for some of the municipalities to publish procurement information. And of course, and I think this should be expected, that COVID-19 and the lockdown has also had a dent on transparency. So these are some of, I think, the key conclusions that we can make from the 2020 survey. And which then leads me to the question of what does this mean for local government? And it is clear that I think it's a common knowledge now that the quality of governance in many of our municipalities is far from what the Constitution requires and what the public is entitled to. It is very clear, and so many bodies, the Auditor General and many other institutions have already pronounced on this. I think the key question then is, what is required to address these deficiencies? Is a radical local government policy reform required to address the challenges in municipalities? Given, for example, that people will always say that only a few of our municipalities are functional. So what do we do next? Do we need a radical policy reform to address these challenges? It is possible that such a shift, just a radical shift, could make a difference. But from our end, certainly the Dalaoma Institute and the International Budget Partnership South Africa, we think that there is enough in the current local government framework to make municipal procurement transparent. There is law, we have regulations, there are policies in each and every municipality. So there is enough in the current regime to make local government transparent when it comes to procurement. I think what could be missing is effective implementation. So we have the laws, we have the regulations. If the law says the name of successful bidders must be published after 5 days after the award, why is it not happening? Why is it only a few of our municipalities are doing so? And when this happens, when they don't publish these names, who is following up? Is the province coming up and following up and say, you are not publishing the names of the successful bidders? Is the national government coming up and say, you are not publishing the names of successful bidders, and therefore this is what is going to take place? So these are some of the, I think, issues that is coming out, that there is effective implementation is missing, and it could be due to lack of will, it could be due to lack of internal organization in capacity, and adequate supervision to ensure that the adequate framework for municipal procurement can be implemented. Of course, there's always room for improvement, but we think that the current regime for local government procurement is solid enough to make municipal procurement transparent. The next key question is what are the key steps that we can take to make municipal procurement more transparent? I think it is very important that each and every municipality must have a functional website with easily accessible information. I think that's the starting point. If we can have all of the 257 municipalities with functional website with easily accessible information, I think that could be the first key step towards making local government more transparent and perhaps more accountable and responsive. The next key question is, once that website has been established and maintained, it is very important that municipalities publish procurement information regularly. It's also important that certain kind of procurement information must be kept on the municipal website. In particular, information such as tender specifications. Once the contract has been awarded, it is important that you keep those specifications online so that community members and citizens can make use of those specifications when service delivery is happening to enforce accountability and to participate in local government. Another critical step is that a lot of work that has been put in the revamping of the e-tender portal is commendable, but it is important that the portal functions with fewer to no disruptions. I think that's a very critical issue that we can have, to have that central place where all government procurement happens, or all procurement is published, to ensure that that platform functions with little to no disruptions. And then I think another step that could make a difference is to ensure that there are consequences for those that fail to publish procurement information regularly. So when a municipality fails to publish the required procurement information, what must happen? Is there any way of ensuring consequence management around this issue of a non-publication of procurement information? Then the critical point is that the commitment to be transparent must be followed by action. We had a couple of instances where a municipality would state that the information, tender specifications are available on this link, and if you click on that link, there are no tender specifications, or tender specifications will be available in the e-tender portal. But if you look at the e-tender portal, there is no tender specification. So it is very important that the commitment to be transparent is followed by action. I think that's go a long way in ensuring that there is transparency. Then the last critical, I think, step is to ensure that there is adequate provincial and national supervision and support. So those municipalities that are clearly demonstrating that they are unable to maintain their website, the national and provincial government should get involved to ensure that those municipalities have good functional websites. and also supervising cases of where municipalities are failing to publish the required procurement information on time. So this is our presentation, and thank you very much for listening, and we look forward to some of your inputs and questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nash, and thank you very much, Tavile, for an excellent and comprehensive presentation. And thanks to the team again for putting this report together and producing the research. So this report will be made available on the Dalla Omar Institute website, and we will also circulate it to everyone here together with the slides, so you should all have access to the detail. So quick recap, 8 questions. Is the website working? Are the tender notices available? Are the tender specifications available? Who got the job? At what price? And is the information accessible after the award has been made? And is the information about the implementation of the contract? And is the information published on the National Treasury's Tender e-portal? Those are the 8 questions that we asked. A few trends. Poor performance, I think, on the whole is the bleak picture that is being presented, with some best practices across the country. I think we should all move to Uppington. David Kruiper municipality clearly is getting a whole lot of things right, so Uppington is the place to be. But on the whole, a bleak picture, and certainly not better performance than 2020, the last time we did this report. And also some questions asked, and I think it's important, we're not just sort of focusing on compliance and hammering municipalities, but also asking, so why? What's the background? And why is this so difficult? What could be some of the organizational issues behind the lack of transparency? It may not always be unwillingness to publish, but sometimes there are just organizational blockages that could crop up. So some very interesting trends that we can look at. So thanks very much. Before we open the floor for some more debate and engage with the questions in the chat box, let's get some responses from 2 experts. We've got Mr. Sakumzi Maekiso and Ms. Colleen van der Westhuizen lined up to give some responses to what we've just heard. Let's start with Mr. Maekiso. He works for Icarus, a consulting company that does a lot of work on the PINK program that Francisca already mentioned for the National Treasury, looking at public finance management improvement in municipalities, particularly focusing at procurement and a number of other issues. So yeah, Sakumzi, having heard all of this, what do you make of it? We're very keen to hear from you before we move over to Colleen. Sakumzi, over to you.
Thanks, Yep. And once again, good morning to everyone on the platform. I hope I am audible, because we just had load shedding now just a few minutes ago, so the network was still getting up and running. So I hope I'm quite audible. Number one, let me thank the team, for sharing such, valuable and also informative information on the transparency globally, in respect of procurement in all of municipalities. So the first one, I think it has taken all of us aback, because we're all focusing on procurement and getting systems running operationally and everything within the municipalities. But then when you get the end of how the procurement has been done, when it should be reaching the public and it's not in the desired state, or the public, the people that should be the beneficiaries of the services of the municipality. And after all, they're using the municipal money to get those services done, and they're not getting the information that they should in order for them to make informative decision. I think it's something that, it makes you wonder, really it makes you wonder. But I think from our end as a PINK team, what we did, because this information somehow it also came through in one of our reports that we normally do per annum for the municipality. So it's called it the baseline assessment report. So we saw that there was something not right, so then we, asked the relevant question that what is it that is not right, in order to get to the right answer. So what we then did was to do an analysis, a business process analysis of the municipality end to end, to understand exactly at a granular level, what are the things that are not going right, what are the things that are going right, that we can start sharing with other municipalities. So after completing that analysis, the business process analysis from where the procurement starts, which is the line function department, up until it has been concluded, and then also which now then need to proceed to the website. So we found quite a lot of inconsistencies within the municipalities themselves. That's number one. Then number two, the issue that I think Prof. Tinashe mentioned, time and time again, was the issue of warm bodies, the capacity within. You'd find that we did the analysis in a mixed bag of municipalities, from one which were deeply rural and those that were in more affluent areas in our 8 municipalities. So we found that the ones that were in the rural areas, things were pretty bad. You'd find 1 or 2 people working in SEM, and they are inundated with a lot of work. So, as an example, if they were to put out one tender for one particular contract, ones which are quite intensive, which is your engineering works, you'd get the responsible over 50 tenders that they need to work through in a given time frame. So it becomes quite daunting for them. And then you'd also find that they've got weak, infrastructure system, your financial system that they're using. That also makes things very bad for them, and also no capacity within the IT division or IT section itself. So now they have to first weave through the information they've received, and once they've done making the award, and then they need to work get to another department, which is your IT, and then they're not control of how the IT people work and what they do and what they don't do. So we found all those inconsistencies, and also how the people operated when we did our survey in the business process. So, which then pointed to an issue of how do we then standardize the operations within, so that all of our pilot municipalities, they have the similar processes, and then they have the similar way in which they do. Because regardless whether you have 50 people or 1 person or 2 people, the issue is there are compliance requirements that need to be met. So then I think the next question that we posed to the MMs were, if you have 10 things that you need to comply with, right, in order to make this transparency work, now you have only 1 person to do all of those 10 requirements. So therefore, you're not even taking this seriously. So we also found that your SCM in most municipalities, even in the metros, it's global in South Africa, that supply chain is still seen as a back-end office that just do tenders and they just do quotation, but not in as a strategic end or a partner within the organization to do the work, and also to be able to, to put the transparency. And what we've also asked the MMs was that if about 45% of your budget, right, is channeled via supply chain, and you only have 2 or 3 people there, aren't you setting yourself up for failure? That you're going to have a disaster. You actually doomed yourself for a big disaster at the end. So I think people are starting to think differently now that we've managed to ask those questions, and to also show them the evidence that we've collected, that there are inconsistencies within their own internal organization, and then there are also inconsistencies with the application of the law in respect of what is required. So those are the things that we've also picked up. And I must say, the other end that Prof and also Ms. Tonko also mentioned, the issue of the specifications and the SLA and the performance. You see, if we can have those published, and I've also read one of the comments, people asking the POPIA Act, would that not impede on some of the information also being put out? So we also need to ask a legal question then, that at what point or which information start now to get into the commercial aspect of each and every one's contract. And once we understand those elements, then we take them out. But what is important, though, is that these are public funds. So therefore, people are entitled to see how their funds are being spent. So the service level agreement, which came out time and time again, it needs to be on the website. People need to see what is being done and how their money is being spent. And also, the relationship between your specification, once it has been drawn up and went through the tender phase, and also what gets to be in the service level agreement on the execution of that particular specification or terms of reference if it's a service. So that relationship needs to be put out on the website. And also then the question is that, for how long? Is it for the duration of the contract up until it's concluded, and also for the subsequent months after it has been concluded? So those are the things that we, in our toolkits of things that we're putting together, the contract and also toolkits and many other things that we're doing, helping the municipalities. We're trying to put down and bed down as part of the good governance principles. So we need to start getting to a point where we analyze the issues, we know them, and then how and what are we going to do about them. So we are putting all those templates and checklists and SOPs in place so that at least people understand. But what was important for us was to analyze the operations within each municipality to understand how they operate and then standardize things within, and then everything else start to move in a particular direction, then everything, you know, in our analysis, and also in hope that it will move in that direction, and also work with the people. Because it's one thing putting out all of these requirements and giving it to them and then walking away, because we've seen many of those things are there. And as a Prof. Tinashe indicated, there's a lot of work that has been done by the government, national, provincially as well, in respect of legislation. There's a lot of legislation out there. There's a lot of things, but the execution thereof, that is where the problem lies, you know. And I think that's where we've lost, you know, the gap between the legislators and also the implementers, was that you just give something and with the hope that everyone would understand, you know, and that doesn't work that way. 26 years down the line, or 27 now, it still has shown that it has not worked. So how are we going to change, you know, and strengthen the execution part of our local government, provincial and national government? Because that is a pandemic on its own, that the execution, boldness of the execution still lags, and lags vehemently across all sectors. So those are the things that, and there are best practices out there within the government itself, but none of those are ever documented and then also shared, and see how that was done and what was done in between, what interventions were put in place, because nothing works on its own. Interventions were put in place to get to that level of execution. So I think that is where we are also now focusing on as the PING, so that we get those things documented down and start working with the people, putting those expert knowledge into document, and also working the people through. If you write something, make sure that you take everyone through until everyone understands what you meant and also what you wanted to be done. So I think that's the tone that we took. But all in all, Prof and the team, I think this is great work. It gives us now a platform as an institution and also as a country. And I see a lot of NT guys are also here. It gives us that platform in order for us to work from the basis of knowing what is there and know what's not there, and then how do we then fix it moving forward. Thanks. I'll hand over to Colleen. Thanks, Prof, and thanks to everyone.
Thank you so much, Sakumzi. I think those are some very critical points that we can pick up later in the discussion. Thanks so much for bringing that perspective in. And let's go to Colleen, who actually sort of is stood at the cradle of this research. You know, I want to blow Colleen's trumpet a bit, because she was one of the first ones to raise this issue of transparency in procurement and wrote some very important and useful guidelines on it, and did research on it even before we got involved as an institute. So looking forward to your views. Colleen, over to you.
Thank you, Jaap. Thank you so much for those kind words. I actually would like to share my screen, and especially in such a big setup. Can everybody see the presentation?
Yeah, we can see it.
Yeah, maybe I should ask Jaap directly. Thank you. So just a note of thanks to DOI and the team. This is, and yeah, I just want to say, given that we also do a lot of work around procurement and procurement transparency, I think as the IBP South Africa, we really understand how much work went into this project and to producing this report. So I just want to say thank you and congratulations. So we've seen that generally the findings from the 2021 survey suggest that it's become even more difficult for residents to access procurement information than it was in 2020. And both Tabile and Tinashe has already referred to why it's specifically important for residents living in informal settlements to be able to access municipal procurement information. Because in many cases, these residents actually rely on outsourced service providers who are obviously appointed through the municipal procurement processes to provide access to basic services such as water, sanitation, and refuse removal. So today, I actually don't want to talk so much as show you why it is important and also show you how residents actually use this information. So this is a photo from a few years ago, and the residents in the room, in this room, are from Thembelihle, which is an informal settlement in the city of Johannesburg. And I actually managed to zoom in to show you what it is that they're looking at. So they're actually looking at tender specifications issued by Johannesburg Water, the entity in Joburg responsible for the delivery of water and sanitation. And that tender was for the hire of vacuum tankers for the desludging of pits and VIP toilets. So in this specific settlement, residents are mostly using VIP toilets as their main source of sanitation, and outsourced service providers are supposed to be desludging these toilets on a regular basis. And just moving on to the next photo, just to show you that in this setting, the residents are actually working their way through these tender specifications. So they were doing this in preparation for a social audit. And in this case, these are older tender specifications. The contract has already been awarded. And the objective in a nutshell of the social audit was to actually assess on the ground whether the service is being delivered, the desludging of the VIP toilets, whether this is actually being done according to the tender specifications. And obviously you need access to the specifications to be able to verify on the ground whether the service is being delivered properly. Then I would like to share a second set of photos with you. This photo shows residents from informal settlements in the city of Ekurhuleni, and they are looking at the tender specifications for the hiring, servicing, and delivery of chemical toilets to informal settlement residents in Ekurhuleni. And unfortunately, the quality of the photo isn't that good, but if you squint, I think you can actually see there is the city of Ekurhuleni and the information. And on the right-hand side, people familiar with tender documents will recognize the way, sort of have these 1 or 2 sentence paragraphs which set out the specifications or the scope of the service to be delivered. So again, is another photo from the Ekurhuleni communities. And again, it shows clearly how residents actually go through this tender specifications or go through this document to see how the service is supposed to be delivered. In the case of chemical toilets, for example, the specifications will tell you, what the toilet unit should look like. How big it should be, specifications around, the door should be able to lock. It also tells you how often these toilets should be serviced and cleaned, how many times a week this should happen. So I think these photos very clearly show how residents are actually using tender specifications to engage government to improve the delivery of the services to their settlements. And unfortunately, the survey results suggest that in most of the municipalities assessed, informal settlements residents' efforts to engage government or engage these municipalities are being seriously hampered by the lack of access to procurement information. And just a side note, the photos show you residents working with the tender specifications. But of course, a lot of the other bits of information that the survey assessed is just as important. For example, it's critical for residents to actually know the name of the contractor that's supposed to be delivering the services. In many cases, they can literally monitor if they know the name when the truck arrives to do the desludging to actually see, is this the right contractor? Or if you have different contractors working in different settlements, delivering the same service. So often, especially with the delivery of, or the servicing of the chemical toilets, often up to 10 contractors have won the same contract, and knowing exactly who won the contract enable residents to actually see which contractors are actually delivering the service according to the specifications. Then I just want to, in conclusion, show you one more photo. I actually see some of our planner colleagues are on the Zoom workshop with us. We received this photo a few weeks ago. So the photos I shared from Thembelihle and Ekurhuleni are from a few years ago, but this is from a few weeks ago. And this shows informal settlement residents, 16 female informal settlement residents in Ekurhuleni and informal settlement in Ekurhuleni, participating in a workshop to help them access municipal information on contracted services to their community. And this is what PlanAct said in their report. Simangeli, who is a community facilitator from Kanshwa, gave an update that as lockdown eases, she's able to hold meetings with community volunteers and run a workshop with them under a tree, using a guide to finding municipal procurement information. And the quality of the photo isn't great, but they were actually using, the residents were using photocopied or photocopies of this guide. There in the corner is the original guide that, with a lot of assistance and input from PlanAct, we actually produced a few years ago to specifically assist informal settlement residents to find information about municipal contracted services. And again, if procurement transparency is improved across municipalities, it becomes so much easier for residents to actually find this information that will then enable them to engage government on service delivery and hopefully improve the delivery of services to their communities. If you want to know a little bit more about the work that we're doing with our partners and also with the informal settlement residents themselves, please follow us on Twitter, Facebook, or visit our website. Thank you very much. Thanks, Jaap.
Thank you, Colleen, and thank you. Colleen, of course, is the head of research at IBP South Africa, and thank you so much to her for, I think, bringing us back to really the core message behind this research and the importance of it. Because when we talk about procurement in the public discourse and in the media, it's often about, obviously the fight against corruption and procurement gone wrong, and fights about who gets the job and who does not get the job and who benefits behind the scenes and all the shenanigans that we unfortunately are so used to, which is not really the core focus of what we're doing here. What we're doing here is really seeking to empower communities and residents of municipalities to have access to essentially information about what their money is being spent on, taxpayers, but also those who are entitled to services, even if they are not taxpayers per se. I mean, we all as a public have access, we have rights of access to that information. So I think critical to take us back to the core message behind this research, and thanks for sharing that, Colleen. So there we have it, the overview of the results and the responses, and I've been keeping an eye on the chat and some very interesting points being made. Just to briefly go through what I've seen coming past, Girish saying that data coverage, of course, is important. I think also links up with the point that Khopotso made about, of course, data costs are key. And it's not always easy for community members to access information via the internet. There must be coverage, there must be data. I think the point also that comes from the information that Colleen shared is that very often you obviously have community organizations that can assist communities with accessing information. We're not necessarily arguing that each and every citizen must now hop onto municipal websites and download multiple megabytes of procurement notices and procurement tenders and wade through that on his or her own. We're trying to create a system of partnership between organizations that can assist communities and with communities, work with communities to hold service providers and municipalities accountable And I think that's an important dynamic in also in the question of data access, etc. Adrian's pointed a few things out. Who monitors service delivery? I think links up to question number 7 in the research, that the information about the implementation of the contract should also be available so that communities and community organizations and residents can assist actually the municipality and the rest of government in holding service providers to account. Louise raised a question about POPIA, and there was a bit of a debate also in the chat about that. And I agree with the sentiment that Albert van Zijl expressed, that we should be careful not to use POPIA and other sort of privacy related legal frameworks sort of as a bit of a red herring or hiding behind it. Of course, I think there are concerns, and I think Sakumzi also related to it, and it could be something that we look into a bit more closely, what the impact of POPIA is on the publication of procurement information. But we've found, and generally I think we see the government likes to hide behind those kinds of arguments. It's a very convenient argument. Politicians love to say that they can't comment because something is sub judice, and often that's a red herring. And I think we need to probe that a bit and distinguish what is truly could be damaging to a company in terms of revealing their trade secrets by publication of information, and information that simply should be made public because it is public money that's being spent and the public cause that is being served. So I think that's an interesting element that we can discuss further. Adrian also made a few points about what happens when contracts are changed, when bids are cancelled. So obviously getting into bit more of a detailed, nuanced look at how procurement is an extremely complex exercise with lots of twists and turns. Not always easy to track all of that in terms of transparency, and we can take that debate further. And a lot of points being made about so what do we make of this? What's the accountability, individual accountability? Who monitors this? Who should ensure that municipalities improve on their performance on this? And I think the point that Sakumzi made about the under-resourcing of supply chain management units and departments within municipalities, seen as the back-end function, and with the greatest respect to those who work in those SCM units, they're sort of seen as administrators that guard and process administrative procedures of tenders and quotes and contracts, not actually recognizing that it is a strategic function in the municipality, and also that there should be strategic linkages between supply chain management and IT, that a website is not just sort of a public relations marketing tool, but also something that should work as a strategic, in terms of serving the municipality, strategic objectives, also in relation to transparency. So those are a few of the points that I picked up, and I don't know if there's anyone in the room that would like to make a verbal input. We have a bit of time. We've got about 20 minutes. I'm going to go back to the panel and to the team for some final responses. But before that, is there anyone who wants to make a verbal input? Please raise your hand, and then I'll give you the floor for a brief question or comment. I see Anil Singh has got a hand up, so maybe we can start there. Over to you, Anil.
Thank you, Prof, for the excellent presentation. I think it was eye-opening. I just wanted to come in on the area of the small municipalities that cannot attract their expertise. But surely the solution around there and the local government legislation does allow shared practices. So they should be looking at a shared option with the district municipality in making sure that they can beef up their procurement on a district development model or something, whatever it is. But that could be a solution because at the end of the day, you can imagine the daunting task for two people to go through contracts and all. You're definitely going to make mistakes. But I'm looking at the shared services concept here. Thank you, Prof.
Great. I think very good input. Thank you, Anil. Sibosisa, I see your hand up. Over to you.
Thanks, Prof. I think a point that must be added to the discussion, is a point about the deviations from the original tender agreement. Yesterday, I was listening to a presentation from National Treasury, and they were explaining that they are inundated with requests for deviations from PFMA institutions. And often this information is not communicated to the public. And this is what very often is at the center of fruitless expenditure and corruption. So I think in the interest of transparency, it's important that the public be informed that should there be any deviation, and we find a way to communicate that to the public. Thanks.
Thank you, Sibusiso. I think that's an excellent point. We'll take that forward. Is there anyone else who would like to make an input? Just checking the list for any hands, or if you want to just jump in and start talking, that is also fine. Albert.
Thanks, Prof. I'm not sure. Thanks, Prof. It's TV Pillay from the National
TV,
Treasury.
go ahead. And after that, we go to Albert. Over to you, TV.
I was listening very carefully to the presentation, and it's very useful. Thank you. There's perhaps we've started off at the back end of the research. The front end of the research would have been useful to get a feel for how municipalities are handling the Section 33 process. The Section 33 of the MFMA talks to long-term contracts. Quite often, short-term contracts may not be of the volume or the extent that people may be interested in. It could be short, the quantum could be small. But the long-term contracts and the design of the MFMAs is clearly in place to bring the transparency mechanism in place upfront before the awarding of a tender, not after the event and then posting it on the website. So that is, for me, the first transparency loop that would have been useful to get a sense of. And I think for the colleagues in the room, it's to deal with all contracts that go beyond a 3-year life cycle. And anyone in the room must not misunderstand that to mean that municipalities can only contract for 3 years, which has been the narrative now for too long, for all the wrong reasons. And the reason to bring 33 on board in this discussion is to ensure that those big contracts, there's a door open for the public to check the draft contracts out, check what the information is that is being put out to tender, make proposals to be part of that tender process, and then submit the bids accordingly as well. Now that design is something that is already built in the legal framework, and had we perhaps done some research around that in these same municipalities to see how that's being implemented, we would probably get a better feel. Now, the one municipality that seems to be quite good at dealing with 33 is the city of Cape Town, where they often seek comments and they look at issues coming through the system before it happens. Now, that then filters into some improvements broadly in the broader outcomes. So I think we need to maybe just look at how that is designed in the system and see why through that process, the support of the community and others that wish to tender can come into the system. And then Section 75 of the MFMA requires the municipalities to publish on their websites. And that is another compliance matter then. And it's around this implementation and the song that we've been singing around implementation now. Forget the policies and the frameworks, get on with implementing things. So that is something that we could probably expand as well as we go. But the comments are there is much appreciated. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mr. Pillay from the National Treasury, of course. So I think you're taking careful note of that and respond shortly. Over to you, Albert, for your comment.
Yeah, maybe just one thing I want to amplify a little bit in what I think the Tabele presented is that, you know, one might make the assumption that the metros and secondary cities that are better resourced are going to perform better, but it doesn't. From what I saw, it doesn't look like the results bear that out. So it looks like on this survey at least, that most of the good performers are not the metros and are often smaller municipalities. Well, obviously can't generalize there either, but it's a smattering of smaller municipalities. And I guess the one other thing that comes through for me as well is that, I mean, it's really important to disentangle the compliance perspective on this from the accountability perspective on this. So, I mean, just in response to TV, City of Cape Town does well on many things, but you actually have to register before you can access any of the procurement information. So that might be good performance in terms of compliance, not good performance in terms of accountability. So that's what I really appreciated from the discussion today, is that the perspectives have seemed to be around accountability, and perhaps that's the greater crisis at the moment. You know, we've had almost 3 decades of punting the compliance angle, and perhaps the important supplement to drive those things ahead is the accountability discussion. And that's largely impeded by the lack of information that this report has put out so nicely. Thanks, Job.
Thanks, Albert. Apologies for the noise in the background on my end. They're doing some work in the yard behind me. So if you hear a lawnmower, then that comes from my end. Apologies for that. Any other inputs, comments, responses that we can take? If not, then I do want to hand back to the team and anyone else on the responses side who wants to come in. Tanash and or Tabile, any responses from your side?
Thanks, Prof. On my end, I think from the discussion in the chat box, I think there seems to be a general consensus that procurement, I think it's one of the critical areas in local government. And all our focus, I think, ought to be focused on, to be placed on how it is taking place in municipalities. And I can see that some of the input from the participants is on how we can enlarge the current research that we have done to also focus on other areas that are critical. For example, the issue of deviations, whether municipalities are publishing those deviations. So those are some of the things that we, going forward, if possible, we could, I think, see how we can include into this research. Yeah, so those are just my few comments on that, and just to thank the useful comments that are coming on the chats.
Thanks, Anash. I see Adrian's got a hand up. Go for it, Adrian.
Thank you, Prof, and thank you for the opportunity to be part of this wonderful discussion. I think that I personally have encountered, because I'm an implementer, is that often the terms of reference have not been well thought out and possibly would not be successful. I won't mention where, but I was part of a briefing on a bid which was following on an initial stage of research and feasibility. And I said to a colleague from a large consulting firm that I wouldn't bid because the initial research was fundamentally wrong. And his comment was, oh, well, we'll bid, the project won't work. They'll then do another project, we'll bid for that one. And I think Mr. Pillay sort of touched on it slightly. It's so important that the money is spent in the right way. And as opposed to possibly the municipality entity not actually having the knowledge available to develop the PORs. Thanks, Prof.
Great, thank you, Adrian. Thanks for that input. Colleen and or Sakumzi, anything from your end as a parting shot before we start wrapping up the discussion? Sakumzi, maybe starting with you.
Thanks, Prof. Look, you know, the previous speaker now, the lady just mentioned that issue about the specifications in terms of reference not being, you know, them. That response from that big company, it's just, it sits, you know, in my mind in a way that, you know, we as a society or as a group in this, you know, in this platform, we've accepted abnormality and we've made it normal, you know, and the current state of how things are done, I think it's highly abnormal. You know, it can't be normal. So, and unless we do something, and we do something meaningfully with the right intentions, and we get it right, and of which this is the start, you know, and, you know, to hear such, and we hear of such every day, and we just, you know, by the way, it just, you know, the order of the day, but it can't be, you know, it's abnormal, and abnormal cannot be normal. So yeah, it is that. And, you know, it's going to take all of us, you know, it's going to take all of us inside and outside of the system to get the system working. And it's a long shot, but, you know, rather take a long shot than not take anything at all. But yeah, we'll obviously, with the team from DOI and Pink, work closely in seeing what we can do on our end, you know, to put things at least right on where we can. But we are committed into this. Thanks.
Thank you, Sakumzi, and thanks also for making yourself available for this discussion. So thanks again. Colleen, anything from your side?
Thanks, Job. Sorry, I just can't resist. I just want to share very quickly one story. It actually follows on from the set of photos I showed from Ekurhuleni. And I think it just illustrates when transparency, government accountability, and engagement between residents and a municipality, when all of that comes together, the outcome of that social audit was a range of recommendations, and some of them actually not focused on the delivery of the actual service of that point, but at that point, but how the specifications didn't touch on certain things. For example, the specifications didn't say that there should be chemical toilets that can be used by informal settlement, disabled informal settlement residents. And because of the relationship between the partner and the metro and the residents, when the contract was put out to tender again, there were actually new specifications written into that contract, which touched on things like that there should be specific toilets that can be used used by residents with disabilities. So I think that just illustrates how transparency and access to the information, how that is one part of a whole process, which includes accountability from government, which includes engagement between residents and government, and that transparency just for the sake of transparency isn't enough. It's part of a whole. Thanks, Job. Thank you.
Thank you, Colleen, and also thanks to you for joining us this morning. So I hope the noise in the background is not too bad, so I'll just start to speak over it. So obviously, I think some very, very useful comments being made, and I just wanted to latch on to the point that Mr. Piller made about the 3-year contracts, and I think that's an interesting, very important, interesting issue that we can take forward in the research, because those 3-year contracts, or the Section 33 contracts that are entered into, of course, there's a council resolution that is necessary, and there's specifically requests in the MFMA where the municipal council must take into account the comments or representations on the proposed contract received from the local community. So there, indeed, you have built in already in the legal framework community input prior to the conclusion of the contract. So I think that's I think a fascinating point that we can take forward. What's also, I think, important to notice that we're looking at sort of procurement in a particular band almost, but there's also procurement that falls outside of the scope of what we have been researching. You know, the quotes and the requests for proposals, you know, that are not necessarily subject to the same rigor, sometimes do entail important issues for communities. You know? So we can definitely take these issues forward and see how we can refine the methodology and make it even more relevant to the overall question, because we certainly would like to continue with this research if we find support to do so, together with our partners at IBP South Africa. So I think overall a very fascinating discussion, important discussion, taking the debate on procurement and finance management a little bit away from the usual focus on compliance and corruption fighting to the theme of accountability and involving residents and communities in the affairs of local government and improving transparency with that objective in mind. So let me start wrapping up. I think we are well within time, so good on us to finish on time. Thanks to the team once again for putting together this research and presenting it so well and clearly to all of us. Lots of requests already for the slides and for the report, so we'll make it available. If I'm not mistaken, we will also make the back end data available. So I think that's in response to the question from the Free State, that we will make available also the detailed questionnaires and the individual scoring of the municipality, so that those who are specifically interested in specific municipalities can look that up and perhaps use that also in supporting those municipalities. We'll make the back end information available. Thanks to the team once again. Thanks to Francisca for joining us with that very clear message at the beginning of our session. Thanks to the respondents, Makumzi and Carleen, great inputs. Thanks to Albert van Zyl from IBP for partnering with us and entrusting us to do this work together with IBP. Thanks everyone. Also want to thank Mandy Cupido in the background, who is responsible for putting together this webinar and keeping us all connected. So thank you so much for that. And I think, yeah, that brings us to the end of this session, unless there's anyone who wants to come in with a final parting shot. We still have 3 minutes. Anyone wants to use the 3 minutes? Going once, going twice. If not, let's call it a day. Thank you very much for attending, and hope to see you at the next webinar of the Institute or IBP South Africa. Thanks very much for joining and have a great day.
Same to you. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks all. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.